नमस्कार दोस्तों। स्वागत है आपका सरल सोशियोलॉजी में। आज बात करेंगे हिस्टोरिकल मटेरियलिज्म की, जो कार्ल मार्क्स का एक बेसिक कॉन्सेप्ट है। इसकी हम डिटेल में बात करेंगे और एक क्रोनोलॉजी में उसको समझने की कोशिश करेंगे। सो लेट्स सी friends. Karl Marx theory of historical materialism is actually a method of understanding society and its development through the material conditions and economic factors that somewhere shape it. So, according to Marx, history progresses through a series of stages, and each stage is characterized by a specific mode of production and class structure. So let's friends explore this theory in more depth with a few additional examples to clarify each stage. The very first stage is primitive communism, and when we talk about its beginning description, we see in the earliest human societies there was no concept of private property. People lived in small egalitarian groups where resources were shared among all members. The primary focus was survival, with everyone contributing to the community by either hunting, gathering, or engaging in basic agriculture. For example, you can imagine a small nomadic village or tribe, whatever you could imagine, where all resources such as food and tools are somewhere communally owned. If one member of the tribe or village hunts an animal, the meat is shared among everyone. There's no hierarchy based on wealth because resources are equally distributed. Another example can be seen in the communal farming practices of early indigenous communities, where land was not owned by individuals but by the group as a whole. Friends, the second stage was slave society. As societies grew and became more complex, the development of agriculture led to surplus production, which in turn created social hierarchies. A class of people, which mostly called the ruling society, began to control the surplus and dominate others. Slavery became the dominant form of production where a small elite owned the land and the slaves worked on these lands. For example, in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh the, and the ruling class owned vast tracts of land while the slaves built the pyramids for them and worked in their fields. And actually, the entire economy of Egypt were dependent on the labor of slaves. And mind one thing, that these slaves had no personal freedom, no property rights, or any other human rights. Similarly, in ancient Rome, the economy was heavily reliant on slave labor, with large estates which were worked by the slaves while their owners lived in a luxury. Another stage, or we could say the third stage, is feudalism. After the collapse of slave society, feudalism emerged as the dominant system in the medieval Europe, and the land was primarily source of wealth at that time, and society was structured around a very rigid hierarchy of lords, vassals, and serfs. The lords owned the land, and the serfs, who were bound to the land, worked on it in exchange for protection and a small portion of the produce. For example, in this middle age, if we talk about France, medieval France, a nobleman might own a large estate that includes villages and farmlands. The serfs who are not free to leave the land work the fields, grow crops, and tend to the livestock. In return, they receive protection from the Lord and are allowed to keep a small part of the harvest. Another example can be seen in Japan during the feudal era, where samurai warriors served under daimyo lords and peasants worked the land in a very similar hierarchical system as described above. The next era is capitalism, and it is the era in which actually Marx was living. The decline of feudalism and the rise of industrialization gave birth to capitalism. And under capitalism, the means of production like factories, machines, lands, etc., are privately owned by the bourgeois. Bourgeois means capitalist class. And the proletariat, that is the working class, sells their labor to the bourgeois in exchange for wages. This system is marked by a significant disparity in wealth and power between the between the workers and the owners. For example, during the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century Britain, factory owners accumulated enormous wealth by exploiting workers who labored long hours in unsafe conditions for meager wages. An example in the cotton mills in Manchester, where children as young as 6 worked alongside adults operating dangerous machines. Another example can be seen in the early 20th century in the United States, where factory owners like Henry Ford accumulated a great fortune while workers in his factory often lived in poverty. Next stage, as described by Karl Marx, is socialism. Marx predicted that the contradiction within capitalism would eventually lead to its downfall. As the working class became increasingly exploited, they would become more conscious for their collective power and rise up in revolution. The goal of socialism is to establish a system where the workers collectively own and control the means of productions, leading to a more equitable distribution of resources. For example, the Russian Revolution of 1907, led by Bolsheviks, was an attempt to overthrow the capitalist system and establish a socialist state. Factories, land, and resources were taken from the bourgeois and redistributed to the proletariat. Although the Soviet Union's implementation of socialism somewhat diverged from the Marx vision, it was an attempt to create a society where the working class had control over the economy. Another example is the Cuban Revolution of 1959, where Fidel Castro and his followers overthrew the Batista regime and implemented socialist policies, nationalizing industries and redistributing lands. The last stage imagined by Karl Marx is communism. And according to Marx, socialism would eventually evolve into communism, a classless society where there is no private property, no state, and no classes. In this state, people would work according to their abilities and receive according to their needs. The state, as a tool of class oppression, would wither away and true equality would be achieved. While true communism has never been fully realized, Marx envisioned it as a society where all resources are collectively owned and there is no need for a government to enforce laws because there would be no classes to create any kind of conflict. In a fully communist society, a doctor and a factory worker would be seen as equally important, and both would contribute to the community without concern for personal wealth. While no country has fully realized this ideal, Marx saw it as the final stage of human development. So, to conclude, I would say Karl Marx's historical materialism actually offers a powerful framework for understanding the development of human societies. By analyzing the economic base of each historical stage, whether it be the communal living of early tribes, the rigid structure of feudalism, or the exploitative nature of capitalism, Marx actually arguing that history is driven by material conditions and the conflicts they create. And he also says each stage of society contains the seeds of its own destruction, which eventually lead to revolutionary change and the final emergence of a classless, stateless society, which he called communism. So, this was a small lecture on historical materialism. I hope you would have liked it. If you have any comment, please write in the comment box and please like, share this video with your friends and colleagues. Thank you. Have a nice day. Good night.